Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar, Thinking Ahead in Local Policies for Successful Energy and Mobility Transition. Thank you a lot for joining us today. I'm Sara De Mayo, Governance and Social Innovation Officer for ICLE Europe, and have been involved in the SMARTEES project for the last 2 years. I have the great pleasure to be your host today, together with my colleague Niklas Miszkowski. SMARTEES aim to identify social innovative policies that foster citizen inclusion and sustainable urban changes in the energy and mobility sector. This is our second SMARTEES event. And you may recall that in the first webinar in November last year, we discussed how local governments can help their citizens to become local heroes, with the example of Samsø Island underlying the potential of bottom-up initiatives and ways to develop them. There is a slight delay in changing the slides, but hopefully it won't be too much of a problem in the future of the webinar. Or maybe I can ask Niklas to support here. Okay. After a COVID-19 related postponement, here we are to continue the discussion from a different angle. It is an opportunity to convey you information that we think relevant and to reconnect after the tough COVID-19 time. We are joined by 3 great guest speakers, and our objective today is to share insights on how local innovation and local governance can not only support pioneers from among their population, but the key drivers for ambitious energy and mobility transitions. Okay, first words about our speakers and what they will cover today. We will first hear from researcher Dr. Giuseppe Pellegrini Masini, who will make 9 policy recommendations for smoother and impactful energy and mobility transitions. Then, Thierry Albronda, a city representative and practitioner of Groningen, Netherlands, will tell us how the citizen involvement in the mobility transition led to fundamental governance changes. Our third guest today, Dr. Frances Sprei, will then provide her perspective on the topic and offer complementary insights for local policy design. We have 1 hour together in total, and we want to make the most out of it in terms of content and interactivity. Thus, we invite you to use the Q&A function throughout the webinar to ask your questions. Before getting started, let's do some quick intros so that we know who's in the room by taking a quick poll. It should appear on your screen in any second. So yeah, you know a bit about us, and we'll be very curious to hear a bit about yourself. Who are you? An engaged citizen or local NGO representative, an academia, from a researcher, student, a local regional government, a national European representative. So yeah, please check the corresponding box and share more about yourselves in the chat. Also, if you want, we'll be interested to know who's in the room. Okay, maybe a few more seconds. And Niklas, let me know if you think we still need to wait.
Yes, hi from my side also, and 80% have voted, so we'll give you a couple more seconds and then close the poll.
Mm-hmm. So these are the final results. Okay. So here are the results. Okay, we've got quite a mix, I have to say, of backgrounds, with the 28% of locally engaged citizens, 34% of a researcher academia member, and 31st local regional government representative, which is great to see. And also 7% of a translocal NGO representative. So yeah, thank you all for being here. Now let's kick off. I have the pleasure to introduce our first panelist, Giuseppe Pellegrini Masini. Maybe we can go back to the PowerPoint when you can, Niklas. So Giuseppe is a postdoc researcher based in the Norwegian University of Science and Technology in Trondheim. He's an environmental social scientist working on the Horizon 2020 SMARTEES research project with us. And he looks at drivers and barriers of energy social innovation regarding renewables, sustainable transportation, and energy efficiency in buildings. He's primarily focusing on energy equality, justice, and efficiency in urban areas. Giuseppe, the question for you today is, when you look at the 10 cities and islands screened within the SMARTEES project, what are the top policy recommendations that you would like to share with us today? You should have the mouse control now.
I have the control, but yes, seems to be working.
Okay. And if it doesn't work well, please tell Niklas and he will do it remotely. The floor is yours.
I will. Sarah, thank you very much for your introduction. Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about 9 recommendations for supporting the energy transition. These are recommendations that we have so far elaborated in the SMARTEES project on our research about barriers and drivers for social innovation. So I will move now to the first slide and the first recommendation. Build on existing engagement. This is very important because we know that pro-environmental attitudes are widespread in society. There are many environmental groups active in Europe nowadays. Most of these groups are very resourceful. They have knowledgeable people that are carrying out great work in these groups. They have high levels of motivation. So it's very important to engage with these groups and to have them on board whenever we try to design and implement an energy social innovation. The second recommendation, I'm trying to move on the slide. Seems a little bit stuck. Okay, here we are. The second one is welcome resistance. Well, resistance, unfortunately, in many cases in local communities can be an issue, but we don't have to be negative about that. We don't have to brush it under the carpet or try to silence it. On the contrary, we need to acknowledge the concerns of citizens. Most of the time, concerns of people are founded, or at least they need to be addressed. It is important to do it through transparent communication, honest communication with the citizens. We need to listen to them because it's important to address any issues that there might be in the design of our energy social innovation. There's nothing wrong in considering to change some aspects of our design at the early stage of our social innovation. Well, we need to build trust. This is perhaps the most important ingredient for the success of social innovation. We know from research, it has been found over and over again that trust towards the actors, the proponents of social innovation is fundamental for its success. How do we grow trust? Well, one way to do it is creating participatory processes. So participation is very important, and having spaces for dialogues. Perhaps the best way to go about it is good old-fashioned public meetings for a start, at least. So meeting people face-to-face whenever possible, listening to them, being present in person, showing your face is very important. Then more elaborate ways to engage with people can be added in the process, but it's a good way to start a process of participation. Third recommendation is accommodate those in need. We know that unfortunately we might have in our society disadvantaged groups whose concerns are not, whose primary concerns are not energy consumption, energy conservation. So we need to keep in mind their concerns. We need to keep in mind the fact that some people might still struggle, and actually many are still struggling to fulfill their needs in terms of energy consumption. We might also be mindful about the fact that energy poverty is often embedded in a wider problem of poverty. So whenever we propose actions and engagement to citizens, we need to keep in mind that their primary concerns will be satisfying their basic needs, and we cannot propose activities that are in conflict with that. That wouldn't work. The fifth recommendation is remembering that it is a team effort. This is very important because whenever we send someone on the field to implement social innovation, or whenever we try to engage citizens in its development, we need to make sure that people work as a team, and especially that people are instructed in an appropriate way in order to deliver the activities that are part of the project. Often these energy social innovations bring together technological implementation and behavioral change. So it is not by any means obvious how people should behave, or it's not it cannot be taken for granted that they have a good understanding of some technology. So we need to explain, we need to make sure that people gain understanding and skills. Do not expect everyone to care. This is probably already clear from what I said earlier. Some people might struggle with focusing on the purpose of the social innovation. We need to make an effort to communicate in the right way. Especially, we need to make sure that people are able to see the co-benefits of our energy social innovation. Well, first of all, it is important, of course, to be mindful in the design of the social innovation of making sure that co-benefits are delivered. But we need also to make clear to people that there are co-benefits delivered. So, for example, when we intervene in a disadvantaged neighborhood, we might want to design a social innovation that is not taking care only of energy consumption, but that is contributing also to make the neighborhood safer, to make the social web and the social cohesion stronger. So we try to deliver other benefits that might win over the will of people to engage in our social innovation. Look out for loop and potholes. Well, I'm talking about regulations here. Regulations are fundamental for promoting and enabling social innovations. Local regulations or national regulations we need to know them very well. We need to make sure that we exploit all the opportunities that regulations offer to us. But we need also to be mindful of the constraints that regulations create. So we might find solution for these constraints. We might use some architectural shifts and architectural changes in our in the design of our social innovation, depending on the regulations that we are facing. But as a last resort, we shouldn't discount the possibility of lobbying for change. This is very important because often our representatives might not have clear that some regulations are an obstacle towards the energy transition. And it is important also to establish contact with the representatives at the local level and also national level, and try to lobby for a change in regulations when it's needed. Use the media as a mediator. Media is are a great amplifier of feelings, and they can be a powerful actor in facilitating a social innovation. But they can also create problems to social innovations whenever they amplify negative feelings related with concerns that the social innovation might create in local communities. So it's very important to have a media strategy. It's very important to establish contacts with media actors, and to make sure that the media work in favor of the social innovation as much as possible, of course. The ninth and last recommendation is rerouting routines. What do we mean for that? We know that people often act in their daily life through habits and routines that are well ingrained. It's not easy to change them, but it's possible. We know for a fact that people learn the most and change the most their behavior whenever they are involved directly in different solutions, and whenever they experience directly something different. So it's important to create a strategy to change habits, to showcase different ways of behaving, involving citizens in direct action, even just for a day or in the space of few days, showing them different ways of engaging in their local environment. Whenever people do that, they often grow the consciousness that it's possible to behave on a daily basis in a different way. So that's all from me. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay. Thank you, Giuseppe. This was very insightful. I would like now to, I think there is an echo. Yeah, okay. I would like to invite now all the audience to reflect and indicate which of these 9 recommendations would be the most relevant for the city you live in. So is it built on existing engagement? Is it to welcome resistance, to be trustworthy, to accommodate those in needs, to remember it as a team effort, to not expect everyone to care, to look out for loop and potholes, to use the media as a mediator, or to reroute routines? So this can be really as an introspection recap, but feel free to share in the chat if you have any thoughts you would like to share with the others. Now, I would like to thank again Giuseppe for your presentation, and welcome our second speaker, Thierry Albronda. So Thierry is working on connecting users and mobility systems by implementing innovative ideas. He is a local government representative and a practitioner in the mobility sector in the municipality of Groningen. Groningen being a pioneer city in the mobility transition and a reference case in our SMARTEES research as well. Terry, we would like to hear from you how your city managed to shift from a car city to a bike city, and especially how this transition influenced a deeper and broader change in your entire urban governance, in institutionalizing social innovation. So let Niklas hand over to you now for the next 8 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Sarah, for the introduction. Let's see if the slides will appear. Yes. Well, good morning, everybody. Now, my name is Terry Albronda, and I'm policy developer for smart mobility in the city of Groningen. And as Sarah mentioned, we are within the cluster of holistic mobility plans, the supporting case of the SMARTEES project. And in this second webinar, we'll give some insights about how we deal with local social innovation in Groningen. But first, some facts and figures about my city, for those who don't know about Groningen. Groningen is, with a population of 230,000, the 5th largest city in the Netherlands and is located in the north of the country. We are a compact city. That means that from the city border to the city center, it's only 6 kilometers. We have a young population with many students and also bars and a good nightlife. Yeah, Groningen is known as cycling city. We have little car traffic in the city center, many cycling facilities, such as separate cycle paths and free guarded bicycle parking. And we do more than 60% of our trips per day in the city by bike. But we were not always so bicycle friendly. Our mobility transition started in the 1970s, a time when the city was dominated by car traffic and buses. Also a time when we had explosive growth in mobility and more space was needed to facilitate that growth. As you can see on the slide, with a lot of car traffic in the city center. How we eventually became so bicycle friendly in Groningen? Well, the turning point was our traffic circulation plan in 1977. The implementation of this plan took place in one night, and the city center was divided in 4 sectors. From that moment on, car traffic could no longer drive directly from one sector to another, while cyclists and pedestrians could still do. And the plan was not broadly accepted, but slowly led to general change in attitude in the years after. Another important project in our mobility transition was the closure of a large park for car traffic in 1993. As a trial, the park was closed for a year, after which a referendum followed. And at that time, only 51% was in favor of maintaining the closure. Closing down the park road became a metaphor and catalyst for new public discussion on the entire transport infrastructure of Groningen. This had to do with the implementation of several projects in the years before, favored public transport and bicycles instead of private cars, resulting in a negative opinion against the local government. To ensure a broader basis for policy making, an extensive participation project was initiated for a renewed transport policy. And from that moment, the mobility transition changed completely the governance logic of urban governance in Groningen. Since the 90s, there was a strong political ambition towards democratic renewal. Even our last coalition agreement contains a number of interesting sentences. I've listed a few on this sheet. As you can see, our ambition is sustainable democratic renewal with far-reaching control and direction by the neighborhood and village communities. I will show you some samples from our daily practice. Groningen, we work for several years now with so-called area teams. These small teams include a district member of the municipal executive board and representatives of the different administrations. They work together in and with the neighborhood. This means that they are visible and easily approachable, and that builds confidence. Our expertise is at the service of the process, and the area team ensures integrality and is the face and link in the cooperation per neighborhood. We also tested new approaches. We tested, for example, with a cooperative neighborhood council in a neighborhood with nearly 12,000 inhabitants. A neighborhood council in which 11 residents and also 6 councillors jointly take decisions about what is happening in the specific neighborhood. The residents are chosen by draw and also have a panel of 400 residents who are also chosen by draw. Neighborhood residents are in the majority because when it comes to the neighborhood, they know best what's going on and what is needed. Another example is our annual inspiration festival Let's Grow, about the future of the city and its surroundings. During this festival, we collect ideas from citizens and organizations who compile and fill in the content of the program themselves. It means everybody is free to tell his story. If we then look to the future, we see that the National Environmental and Planning Act states that the responsibility for participation no longer always rests with the government. The initiator, whether it's a citizen, a developer, or the municipality, takes care of the participation process. That's why we have developed a participation workbook that everyone can use. The workbook contributes to increasing democratic quality. The material supports in shaping a careful democratic process involving more and also other people. And recently, due to the COVID crisis, we added a first aid kit for online participation. In other words, we are dealing with the changing position of the government, from the heart of society in the past to be part of society in the future. To conclude my presentation, I have some final statements. Democratic renewal has to do with the transition from factor C, communication, to factor D, democracy. This means that municipalities have a spin in the web function, and at the same time, their roles shift from decision-making to a facilitating and co-creating role. This creates a new balance between government, civil society, and the private sector, as is evident through collaboration and new networks. You could say that participation is an art form, the art of connecting, letting go, and grasping when needed. When the circumstances allow you to, you're more than welcome to visit Groningen. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Terry, for sharing your Groningen experience. I found very interesting the principle, the logic of the area-oriented cooperation, and the fact that you managed to create a cooperative neighborhood council, and the idea of this Let's Grow festival to allow participants to also invent the next chapters of the Groningen story. And the other example of a simple online Groninger participation workbook. Yeah, very inspiring. Thank you again. So now I think it will be interesting to hear again from our participants on practices in your various cities via a second quick poll. I'll be curious to know, how does your city define citizen participation, and which approach do you think is predominant then in its urban governance? Is it the factor C? So more about communicating what is being thinking and deciding within the local government, or factor D, having a will to implement democracy and involving all citizens in the transition. So we can give you a couple of seconds so you can think a bit about it and click on the corresponding checkbox. And I'm looking forward to know a little bit which stage you are at. Yeah, citizen participation can really have very different definition from a city to another. So it will be important to keep in mind these differences. So I hear from Nicholas that 50% of you have answered. Maybe we can wait 5 more seconds. Thank you to everyone who already checked the box. And yeah, let's maybe have the result now. So yeah, it seems that factor C, communication, as the definition of the approach of citizen participation, stays the main one. Unfortunately, but that also means that this webinar may be useful also for those, more useful for those who are in a city with still stuck in factor C. So yeah, I don't know, Terry, would you like to shortly comment this poll result and maybe give a quick tip to our participants that answered factor C?
Well, interesting score, I think. Also for us as Groningen to know where we are in our transition, and I think it means we have to share our knowledge with more people than that we collect new things from others. So that's what I can say, that through the SMARTEES project and in other ways, we will share our solutions and our daily practice more and more. So yeah, it's we know that we are now a front runner in factor D. So thank you for that. Yeah.
No, thank you, Terry, for this. Now I would like that we take 5 minutes. I see that some questions have been written in the Q&A function window. Nicholas, do you want to share with us a question that have been submitted so far?
Yes, hello everyone. Let me do that. So there are a bunch of questions. And let me see, I'll just try, we won't be able to get them all, I guess, but let's start with the one on Groningen. So this one goes to Terry from Prija Ajit. What are some of the successful projects of public-private partnerships in Groningen?
Ooh, how much time do we have? Well, there are of course a lot of projects done already, and what we see in this cooperation within neighborhoods, it's always also small solutions from a point of view of the local government, which are major solutions for the citizens of a neighborhood. So it can be more green in a certain area. It can be some small facilities. It can be a small reconstruction of infrastructure. So there are several solutions that we can mention. What's also interesting to tell is that these cooperative councils have their own budget from the local government, so they can decide what's been done with the budget within their neighborhood, and that's why there's a lot of cooperation, and there are a lot of people from the panel, but also the rest of the inhabitants that have ideas about how to invest that money in their neighborhood. So there are several projects done already.
Okay, thank you. Then one more also on Groningen. Is it actually practical to implement the citizen participation aspect in policy formulation when it comes to large cities? And this, I guess, also goes to Terry, but maybe Giuseppe, you can also comment on that from the SMARTEES project experience a little bit.
Yeah, I can tell something about it. I think implementing this democratic renewal in your policy is needed. There's political will, so we are implementing it, but we don't implement it in every neighborhood in the same way. So it also depends on the energy in a certain neighborhood, if a certain solution fits to that neighborhood or not. The cooperative council works in this specific neighborhood, but maybe it's not a solution for another neighborhood. So there are different types of cooperation, also in Groningen, that we tested. So it's not one solution fits all. So you have to look at the energy and what kind of people you have in a certain neighborhood to know in what way you can cooperate with them.
Okay, thank you. Giuseppe, do you want to add anything or? Sorry, you muted. You should yourself muted right now.
Now I should be unmuted.
Yes,
so essentially, I agree wholeheartedly with Terry. I think that in large cities, the problem is often that there are neighborhoods widely different one from another. And unfortunately, in large cities, we see very often this problem of having some deprived neighborhoods that maybe in smaller cities are not so common. And it's very important to be mindful of these differences. So whenever we design an intervention, we need to enable local residents to participate in the social innovation. So if this is a deprived neighborhood, we will have to make sure that we have in the design of our social innovation actions that are enabling these people to get themselves on board. So whether being that a problem of material deprivation or lack of knowledge and skills, we need to intervene on these barriers to make the social innovation take off.
All right, thank you. Do we have one more question or is time over? Sarah, what do you think?
I think we can continue the discussion in the second Q&A section, and for now we can move. So great so far, everyone, for these questions, and to Giuseppe and Terry for answering. We'll continue now the webinar with the third and final presentation. So I would like to welcome our third speaker, Dr. Francis Sprei from Chalmers University of Technology in Sweden. Francis works as a professor at the Department of Space, Earth and Environment. Her research assesses different personal mobility options, such as alternative fuel vehicles and electric vehicles, as well as innovative mobility forms like car sharing. For her PhD and contribution to sustainable development, she received in 2018 the Jan-Erik Sundgren Award. Sorry if I don't pronounce it correctly, but yeah. Frances, I love the insights that you shared in our first webinar, and we are really delighted to have you today again. So what we would like to hear from you is, what are the main points you think we should take away from today's presentations? What are the key learnings you'd like to call out for designing and implementing better policies? So Frances, I hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Hello, everybody. This is a very fun webinar to be part of, and I hope I can give some additional insights after two very good presentations previously. So let's see, again, oops, now I was too quick. So I had a similar role in the webinar in November, so I thought I'd reconnect to that, because I think there are some points there that we see even from the insights into this in this webinar, where a lot of the insights there were related to respect, which is related to this aspect that has been brought up by both Terry and Giuseppe about involving different people, which is a key cornerstone, respect and trust and cooperation between different types of actors. And that then also leads to empowerment, which I would say is also related to this shift from factor C to factor D in communication, in which when you have more of the democracy focus, you also have an empowerment of the people living in the city or in the neighborhood. That is also one of the essential outcomes and ideas with social innovation, that it's not supposed to only achieve the change, for example, in mobility or in energy transition, but also have a wider societal implication and co-benefits. So I think what is important to think of is this, when we're talking, what we talked about with this webinar was that the important thing is if we look at how can we institutionalize, how can you scale up, how can you maintain these kind of social innovations? And I think an important point there is to look at what are the initial conditions. I think Terry, when he talked about this, that these different local councils or participation models differed between different neighborhoods, was a typical example of that you have different initial conditions, and they are very important for what strategies you're going to have to reach your goals. But the different initial conditions can also be depending on who initiates this. Is it the local government? Is it a local organization? Is it a bottom-up grassroots start of this? That might depend on what strategies you have and how you can overcome barriers, such as that a lot of things are done in different silos, that there might be a lack of innovation, that one has kind of stagnated in. Giuseppe talked about habits and routines when it comes to individuals, but there are also habits and routines when it comes to institutions and even business models that need to be shifted around. And that also you might have a lot of dispersed efforts that are not coordinated that need to be looked at. Another thing that is good to keep in mind is that when you start a social innovation, whatever actor you have, you might have one type of goal that might need to be refined, either because you're taking in different types of views, such as Giuseppe when he talked about listening to the resistance and taking into their views as well, but also maybe because if you are changing over time, or if you are broadening out to a larger area, there might be different goals that are important. So that flexibility is also important to remember. So talking about these other key words that I think are important that have been brought up throughout those is this part about inclusion. And I wanted to bring out two groups. That is, we've talked a lot about inclusions of citizens, but it's also important to think about businesses that are involved. A lot when it comes to, for example, mobility transitions, shop owners, business owners in certain areas are a group that is very concerned about how will it affect their businesses. We've seen this, for example, in Oslo, when Oslo wanted to make their their city center car free. A lot of shop owners were resistant to that change, which means that they changed their policy to reduce parking availability instead and increase the possibility for bicyclists and public transport to come. And those people are actually those that interact more with different type of shops than car users. But it's also can also be different type of service providers. What we see a lot in cities coming up now are innovative ways of providing mobility services. So my research is related to mobility, and so those are also important to incorporate in these kind of discussions. What is interesting to see is that when one looks at a lot of different social innovations or transitions within mobility, it is rare that you do find the dominant traditional actors within businesses, maybe because they are often car manufacturers or then that are not as prone to wanting to have change. And so the question there is, do you want to involve them, or how can you listen to them and just making sure that they do not become a barrier? And then I just want to highlight, as Giuseppe has done before, that disadvantaged groups are extra important to make sure to include, that might be harder to reach through communication, and that might be needed an extra effort to make sure that their voices are heard as well. And so also that the innovation benefits them, because it's not always sure that the people that are engaged are aware of what actual changes do these disadvantaged groups want. The second point I want to talk about is the importance of knowledge and skills, and also an acknowledgement that there are different types of knowledge. There are domain-specific knowledges, there's site-specific knowledges, and as we talked about disadvantaged groups, there might be knowledge within these groups that is important, but that there's sometimes also perceived hierarchy of groups of knowledge, that some knowledges seem to be more important than others. But I think what is important is to understand that this might not always be the case for social innovation, that many different types of knowledge, such as knowledge about the local environment and of the people living in a certain neighborhoods and their needs and worries and ambitions, is a very important knowledge as well. And then there are also this with different types of skills. It's important to remember that there are different skills that are needed, both in empowering and educating the people involved, but might also be related to who needs to be involved in the social innovation, that there are ways of including different types of actors to make sure that you have these skills. And these can be skills related to culture and social skills, such as knowledge management and sense making, political skills related to networking, advocacy, resource mobilization skills relating to financial aspects as well. And then the third one that I want to bring up is laws and regulations. So with laws and regulations, as Giuseppe mentioned, these can both be enabling and be a barrier. And I think what's important to keep in mind is that laws and regulations have to be in one way steering in the direction of the goal, but being flexible enough for allowing new innovations to come in. And this is very challenging, and when it comes to these kind of policies, like how do you avoid that you create new lock-ins? But I think one important thing is that you allow for experimentation and trialability. And just with this law and regulations, there's also this difference of local level versus national level. In Sweden, for example, parking regulations have been mandated at the national level laws, which have been sometimes a barrier for local governments to use them as a regulations to be able to address mobility issues. And so one important fact with this is this experimentation and trialability. And so I just wanted to bring up for maybe for discussion ideas that the changes that have happened during the lockdown now, could see them as a window of opportunity. I think Terry mentioned this road through the park, how that was first a trial. That's one way to meet resistance, to allow people to try out the new situation, and therefore to be accustomed and see what works, what doesn't work, what needs to be adjusted. And I think we have an excellent opportunity now to be able to see what, when we have changed certain structures in cities for walkers and cyclists, what of these can be maintained and created to a better transition. So thank you for listening, and looking forward to questions.
Thank you a lot, Frances, for this rich summary on the topic. Before reopening a round of questions, I would like to welcome back on video our three speakers, and also ask to the whole panel a question. I mean, working from home and homeschooling, accelerated digitalization during the COVID-19 confinement measures. And I was really wondering about the first impacts on commuting and mobility that you may have noticed. I mean, negatively maybe on public transportation, but positively with more cycling model use. So it would be good also to hear a few words and to reconnect also with this pandemic context. So I don't know, if this crisis also can tell us something good and how to generate innovation with these challenging times. So yeah, how it can help us to innovate and in a sustainable fashion. So I don't know, Giuseppe or Frances, do you want to come first, or Giuseppe?
Yes, well, I think that the environmental advantages of remote education and remote working are clear to everyone. I mean, if we look at the levels of pollution, for example, in northern Italy, which has been severely affected by the COVID crisis, we see that they have dropped in recent weeks. And this has contributed itself to the quality of life of people living in the area, because northern Italy, unfortunately, is one of the most polluted regions of Italy in terms of quality of air. So there are clear advantages. At the same time, we cannot discount some challenges of this situation and how this affects education and the engagement of young people. So I think that we might want, in the long term, to keep in place some of the benefits of this change, while at the same time trying to find ways to address problems related with the level of engagement. And another problem that has been highlighted in several countries is, again, regarding disadvantaged communities. Many of these disadvantaged communities found very difficult to keep up with remote education. Their children didn't have the means to engage in remote education, or they didn't have the skills to do it. So we need to address this problem too.
Okay, thank you, Giuseppe. Terry, as a practitioner and working in the local government, like how your work in the mobility sector was affected because of the crisis. I'll be curious to hear from you.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it was of course interesting to see that due to COVID, everywhere in the world, everybody was talking about cycling and walking and not going by car and public transport anymore. They discovered the bike, and we were for decades in a situation that more than 60% of our daily travel was already by bike, and so we saw less bike traffic than before COVID-19 because people stayed at home instead of people were transferring from car to bicycles. So we are in the stage now that especially in the inner city, we first in the 70s banned car traffic from the inner city. The last couple of years we banned public transport from the inner city, and now due to COVID we need more space for pedestrians in the inner city, so we ban bicycles from the inner city. So that's for us the next level that we are facing now, to give pedestrians more space. The 1.5 meter we have here in the Netherlands, that means that we need more space for pedestrians, and that means that bikes are not allowed to go to the city center anymore. But it also means that there's less use of public transport at this moment, and that's the main problem, because Groningen within its region that's where all the facilities are, and from greater distances people have to travel to the city, and especially students use public transport. And just this week the schools started again, so we have to see if how it goes with public transport at this moment.
Okay.
Yeah, we are looking for opportunities to accelerate some innovations of banning also car traffic in other parts of the city.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Terry, for your perspective. I don't know, Frances, if you have any final remarks on related to this topic before we go to another question.
I think we can open up for questions since for time reasons.
Okay, great. Niklas, you've been monitoring closely the Q&A question, so over to you for the audience questions.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. So there was still one question left, which I think is from the last round, which I think is also good at this point. From James McGeever, he says, last year Groningen held the 6th SUMP conference, SUMP meaning Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan. How much of the European Commission supported SUMP guidelines, including sections on social innovation, is being used by you? So that's the first question. And then the second one is, are we preparing any new tools in SMARTEES? And if so, why, if others are available? But maybe the first one would be interesting, how this already existing SUMP plan connects with the work that you have described in your presentation.
Yes, okay. Well, yeah, actually we hosted the SUMP Congress last year, and for some colleagues SUMP was already known as a guideline, and for a lot of colleagues it was new. So it helped us to broaden this guideline within our organization, and since the beginning of this year, we started with a new mobility policy plan, and we are using the newest guidelines now to build up the plan, and also the cooperation with inhabitants and the local organizations. So it's now in our DNA. So it always helps to host these kinds of events, to influence also your colleagues within your own organization, to see the benefits of these European guidelines.
Thank you, Terry. Yeah, mindful of time, shall we wrap up this section, Frances, Terry, and Giuseppe, with any final remarks, or do you have any main message that you really would like to make before my closing words?
I can just say that with the COVID discussions, since I didn't say anything there, I just want to say that it's like, if we look at what happened in China with air pollution and went very quickly back to the same levels again in production. So I think it's also this fact that we can make the change if we want to. So this is a window of opportunity and we can take it. We can't expect that what is happening now automatically will lead to change because of people have experienced something else. But it's again this with envisioning goals, and this is a chance to try out something new and to make it work and to give people that experience of trying something new, of more walking and biking, for example.
Thank you a lot, Frances. So yeah, with an eye on the clock, I would like to disclose the topic of our next